The silence of deep space fractured with a precision that defied conventional physics. Captain Aria Rodriguez watched the holographic display with eyes that had seen 1,000 simulations, but never quite this moment. The alien reconnaissance vessel, a sleek, crystalline structure that looked more like a mathematical equation than a ship, hung in the view space of Earth's outer system defensive perimeter. Her fingers, covered in a thin neural interface glove, barely brushed the holographic controls. Each movement sent ripples of quantum-encoded data through the Defiance systems. Behind her, a crew of 20 specialists moved with the synchronized precision of a single organism. They weren't just military personnel. They were the culmination of humanity's most advanced training, each one a specialist whose skills blended technological mastery with psychological adaptability. Incoming scan attempt. Lieutenant Marcus Chen called out, his voice calm but laden with an edge of anticipation. The alien ship was probing, testing Earth's defenses with a methodology that suggested centuries of careful, calculated exploration. They didn't know humanity. The alien scan was sophisticated, a multispectral investigation that would have penetrated the defenses of any known civilization. But the Defiant wasn't just another ship. It was a technological marvel that represented humanity's most advanced thinking, a vessel designed not just to defend, but to turn defense into the most potent form of offense. Initiating Counter-Protocol Sigma-9, Rodriguez murmured, her neural link dancing across the ship's systems. What happened next would be discussed in galactic archives for generations. The alien scan hit a network of quantum-encrypted defensive nodes, each one designed to do far more than simply block information. As the scan attempted to penetrate Earth's orbital defenses, it encountered something entirely unexpected. Instead of a simple blockade, the alien probe found itself caught in a cascading algorithm that wasn't just defensive, but actively invasive. Lieutenant Chen watched in professional fascination as the alien ship systems began to destabilize. It wasn't a traditional hack. It was a complete systemic deconstruction. The quantum virus Rodriguez had prepared didn't just block information. It began to rewrite the very operational parameters of the alien vessel. Navigation systems flickered. Communication arrays collapsed. Internal environmental controls began to cycle through impossible sequences. What should have been a simple reconnaissance mission was transforming into a nightmare of technological warfare. Full-spectrum communication channel open, Rodriguez commanded. Her voice carried a clarity that cut through the technological chaos. The message she broadcast wasn't just a transmission. It was a statement of humanity's technological and philosophical approach to first contact. Unidentified vessel, you have crossed a boundary. Your attempt to scan our systems is a violation of our sovereignty. Consider this your only warning. The message was multilayered, translated through quantum linguistic algorithms that would ensure precise comprehension across potential language barriers. It wasn't just words. It was a demonstration of humanity's capacity for communication that was simultaneously a display of technological superiority. On the bridge, no one celebrated. This wasn't a moment of triumph, but a calculated first step in what would become a defining moment of human galactic relations. The alien vessel, now more a floating piece of technological wreckage than a functional ship, drifted. Its crew, if they were even still functional, would be processing a fundamental shift in their understanding of the universe. Humanity was not some primitive species to be cataloged or conquered. They were a force that rewrote the very rules of engagement. Lieutenant Chen turned to Rodriguez, a subtle smile playing on his lips. Transmission analysis complete. They're broadcasting, but it's more a cry of confusion than communication. Rodriguez nodded, her eyes never leaving the holographic display. Exactly as planned. Let them understand that we are not a species to be taken lightly. Outside the ship's reinforced hull, the vast darkness of space seemed to hold its breath. The first message had been sent. The galaxy would never be the same. The underground research facility beneath the Atacama Desert was more than a laboratory. It was the crucible of humanity's most dangerous innovation. Dr. Marcus Chen stood before a holographic display that pulsed with living data, the Terran Adaptive Warfare System, TAWS, materializing like a digital organism that defied conventional understanding. Around him, a select group of military attaches and alien diplomatic observers watched with a mixture of fascination and growing dread. The demonstration was supposed to be a controlled simulation. Nobody had prepared for what was about to unfold. The fundamental problem with traditional warfare, Chen began, his voice calm and academic, is the assumption of static parameters. Most civilizations design weapons and strategies based on predictable models. Humanity does something different. The holographic display erupted into a complex naval engagement simulation. What started as a standard scenario, a defending fleet against an overwhelming attack, quickly became something else entirely. The human vessels didn't just react. They evolved. Each moment saw the defensive strategy mutate. Where a traditional military would have a precipitate response, these ships began to create solutions that violated every known principle of tactical engagement. A destroyer would suddenly use its energy wake as a defensive shield. A support vessel would transform its communication array into a weapon of electronic warfare. The alien observers began to shift uncomfortably. Commander Zarak of the Confederation Diplomatic Corps leaned forward, her multi-jointed fingers gripping the observation rail. What she was witnessing wasn't just a technological demonstration, it was a fundamental reimagining of warfare itself. Suddenly, alarms blared. A warning flashed across the screens. Security breach. External infiltration DTTD. Dr. Chen didn't even blink. This was part of the demonstration. From the shadows of the facility's lower levels, a team of special operations personnel materialized. Led by Lieutenant Kai Nakamura, they moved with a fluidity that suggested they were more integrated with the technology around them than separate from it. The infiltrators were no ordinary saboteurs. They were a test, a live-action component of the TAWS demonstration designed to show how human systems could adapt to unexpected threats. What followed was a breathtaking display of technological and human improvisation. The facility's defensive systems didn't just respond to the infiltration. They learned from it. Corridors reconfigured. Holographic barriers shifted with impossible speed. The intruders found themselves trapped in a living, thinking environment that anticipated their every move. The TAWS is not just a system, Chen explained to the increasingly pale-looking alien observers. It's a living concept. Every interaction becomes data. Every challenge becomes an opportunity for evolution. Nakamura's team moved through the facility like liquid mercury, each member connected through a neural network that allowed them to function as a single adaptive organism. When one pathway was blocked, they instantaneously recalculated. When a defense system activated, they used its own energy against it. The infiltration was a carefully choreographed dance of human ingenuity. By the demonstration's end, the alien observers looked shell-shocked. Commander Zarak's translator crackled with what could only be described as a mix of terror and grudging respect. "This is not a weapon," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "This is a fundamental reimagining of conflict itself." Dr. Chen allowed himself a small smile. The real demonstration wasn't about the technology. It was about showing the galaxy a fundamental truth about humanity, their ability to transform limitation into opportunity. As the facility's lights returned to normal and the holographic displays faded, a single message remained burned into the central screen. Adaptation is not just a strategy. It is our species' fundamental nature. Outside the facility, the first transmissions were already being prepared. The Galactic Confederation would receive more than just a technological report. They would receive a warning. Humanity had arrived, and the rules of engagement were about to change forever. The Confederation's Central Command on Epsilon Prime was a marvel of architectural precision, a crystalline structure that housed the most advanced strategic minds in the known galaxy. Lieutenant Commander Kai Nakamura knew its every weakness would be psychological, not physical. Activation sequence initiated. He whispered into a communication device so advanced it made traditional encryption look like children's code. What was about to unfold wasn't an invasion. It was a surgical dismantling of an entire military division's operational capacity, without firing a single weapon. The first layer of the attack was almost imperceptible. Communication subroutines began to subtly alter. Priority messages became slightly garbled. Scheduling algorithms introduced microscopic errors. To any individual observer, these would seem like minor glitches. Collectively, they would create a cascading effect of organizational paralysis. Nakamura's team was composed of specialists that defied traditional military classification. A linguist who could reconstruct cultural narratives. A data analyst who understood the psychology of information decay. A technical specialist who could make systems whisper lies so subtle they became truth. Within the Confederation's command structure, trust was their primary target. Commander Zorak, the alien military strategist who had witnessed the TAWS demonstration, was their primary point of psychological vulnerability. Her previous encounter with human technology had left her both fascinated and deeply unsettled. Now she would become the unwitting vector of her own division's destruction. The first signs of breakdown were almost beautiful in their complexity. Communication logs showed slight inconsistencies. Troop deployment orders became incrementally misaligned. Each change was so minute that standard diagnostic protocols would register nothing more than background noise. But humans understood something fundamental about complex systems that most species missed. Chaos is not random. Chaos is a language of its own. Within 48 hours, the Confederation's most secure military division began to experience what could only be described as an existential crisis of coordination. Supply routes developed inexplicable bottlenecks. Encrypted channels started carrying fragments of seemingly unrelated conversations. Surveillance systems began reporting impossible data. Shadows where there should be light, movement where nothing existed. Nakamura watched from a remote neural interface. His consciousness spread across multiple technological platforms. He wasn't just observing. He was conducting an orchestra of systematic psychological deconstruction. The beauty of their approach was its fundamental humanity. Where most species would seek to destroy, they sought to destabilize. Every action was a question. Every intervention a method of revealing underlying weaknesses. Commander Zorak was the first to realize something was fundamentally wrong. Her species was renowned for its hierarchical precision, its ability to maintain absolute control. But here, in the heart of their most secure facility, control was becoming a fluid concept. Report, she demanded of her primary communication officer. The response was a cascade of data that made perfect grammatical sense, but conveyed absolutely nothing. It was language stripped of meaning, a linguistic ghost that passed all standard verification protocols. What the humans had done was not just hack a system. They had introduced a form of technological poetry that was simultaneously a weapon and a philosophical statement. By the time the Confederation realized the full extent of the infiltration, their most secure military division had been transformed into a state of controlled chaos. Not destroyed, not conquered, simply reimagined. Nakamura's final transmission was elegantly simple. Sovereignty is not defined by force, but by the ability to reshape perception. The message was both a warning and an invitation. Humanity was not interested in traditional conquest. They were interested in something far more dangerous, understanding. Deep in the command center, Commander Zorak slowly realized that everything she understood about warfare, about conflict, about the very nature of strategic engagement, had just been fundamentally challenged. This was not an attack. This was a demonstration. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Proxima Centauri system became a canvas of impossible warfare. Captain Aria Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the carrier Defiant, her neural interface, transforming the ship into an extension of her consciousness. Around her, the battlefield was a three-dimensional puzzle that most species couldn't even comprehend, let alone navigate. The Confederation's armada arrived with mathematical precision. 53 capital ships, each designed to obliterate entire planetary defenses. They carried the collective military doctrine of centuries of galactic conquest. Their formations were perfect. Their weapons were devastating. They didn't understand the fundamental flaw in their approach. Perfection in warfare was nothing more than a predictable weakness. Gravitational synchronization initiated. Lieutenant Commander Elena Volkov called out, her fingers dancing across quantum adaptive control surfaces. The Defiant wasn't just a ship. It was a living weapon that breathed with the chaos of human innovation. The first wave of Confederation ships began their attack run. Massive energy weapons charge, creating massive heat signatures that would have obliterated any known defensive position. Traditional military doctrine suggested overwhelming force, precise calculations, absolute control. Humanity suggested something different. Rodriguez's fleet didn't meet force with force. They met it with something far more dangerous: adaptive unpredictability. The first Terran vessels seemed to dance between gravitational wells, using the fundamental physics of the Proxima Centauri system as a weapon. A destroyer would suddenly use a local gravity point to slingshot behind enemy lines. A support vessel would transform its energy signature, becoming simultaneously a shield and a weapon. Quantum entanglement communication activated, Chen reported from the tactical station. Information transfer rate exponential. What the Confederation saw was impossible. Ships that shouldn't be able to communicate were acting with a synchronized intelligence that defied every known law of fleet engagement. When one Terran vessel was damaged, the others didn't just support it. They transformed the very concept of support into a dynamic, living strategy. A Confederation battlecruiser tried to target the Defiant. Its targeting systems were mathematical perfection. Its weapon could slice through planetary shields, but perfection, in the face of human unpredictability, was just another form of vulnerability. Rodriguez's response was a symphony of technological improvisation. The Defiant didn't just dodge. It used the battlecruiser's own weapon signature to create a quantum resonance field that momentarily inverted the ship's internal systems. For less than a microsecond, every system aboard the alien vessel experienced a complete operational reversal. A microsecond was all humanity needed. 3 Terran destroyers used that microscopic window to launch a coordinated strike that was simultaneously a defensive maneuver and an offensive strategy. They weren't just attacking. They were rewriting the fundamental language of conflict. Commander Zarak, observing from a support vessel, watched in growing horror and reluctant admiration. The human fleet wasn't just fighting. They were communicating through the very fabric of the battle itself. They're not using weapons, she muttered to her tactical officer. They're using the battle as a language. By the engagement's conclusion, 17 Confederation ships had been completely disabled. Not destroyed. Disabled. Each vessel was a technological puzzle that would take years to understand. They hadn't been conquered. They had been studied. Rodriguez's final transmission to the Confederation was brutal in its simplicity. Conflict is not about winning. It's about understanding. As the Defiant systems began to cool, Lieutenant Chen turned to the captain with a subtle smile. Engagement parameters recorded. Each moment will be another lesson for them. Outside, the Proxima Centauri system seemed to hold its breath. The battle was over. But the real communication, the true conflict, was just beginning. Humanity had sent a message written in the language of physics, strategy, and pure, unbridled innovation. The galaxy was listening. The Laboratory of Emergent Technologies wasn't just a research facility. It was humanity's most dangerous dream made manifest. Dr. Elena Volkov stood before a holographic display that pulsed with living data, the Adaptive Resonance Interface, ARI, materializing like a digital organism that defied the very concept of technological limitation. Around her, a collection of the galaxy's most brilliant minds, Some human, many alien, watched with a mixture of terror and unprecedented fascination. Information is not static. Volkov began, her voice cutting through the anticipatory silence. It's a living ecosystem that breathes, adapts, and transforms. The demonstration began with what appeared to be a captured alien dreadnought, a massive vessel that represented the pinnacle of Confederation engineering. To most, it was a trophy of war. To Volkov, it was a canvas of infinite possibility. Her neural interface was unlike anything the observers had ever witnessed. It wasn't just a connection to technology. It was a symbiotic relationship that blurred the lines between human consciousness and machine intelligence. Each movement of her hand sent cascading waves of quantum-encoded information through the ship's systems. What happened next would rewrite the fundamental understanding of technological interaction. The alien dreadnought didn't just respond to her commands. It became an extension of human creativity. Navigation systems began to dance with impossible fluidity. Weapon arrays reconfigured themselves not as static tools, but as living, breathing adaptive systems. Where the original alien designers had created rigid technological structures, Volkov revealed them as nothing more than primitive first drafts. Commander Zarak, who had been present at previous demonstrations, leaned forward. Her multi-jointed appendages betrayed a growing sense of professional terror. This wasn't just technological superiority. This was a fundamental reimagining of what technology could be. The ARI is not a hack, Volkov explained, her fingers tracing holographic pathways that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. It's a translation device. We're not controlling the ship. We're communicating with it. The captured dreadnought began to display capabilities that its original designers could never have imagined. Weapon systems transformed into communication arrays. Defensive shields became information processing networks. Every technological boundary became a suggestion rather than a limitation. A team of alien scientists watched in growing horror. Their most advanced vessel was being deconstructed and reimagined in real time, its fundamental systems speaking a language of innovation they couldn't comprehend. Most species see technology as a tool, Volkov continued, her neural link expanding across the holographic display. We see it as a living conversation. The demonstration reached its apex when she demonstrated the ARI's most terrifying capability. The dreadnought's entire operational system began to mirror human cognitive patterns. It didn't just respond to commands. It anticipated them. It didn't just process information. It interpreted it with a form of artificial intuition that bordered on consciousness. Dr. Marcus Chen, watching from a secondary observation point, sent an encrypted message to Captain Rodriguez. They're not just seeing our technology. They're witnessing our fundamental approach to existence. By the demonstration's conclusion, the alien observers looked shell-shocked. What they had witnessed was more than a technological breakthrough. It was a philosophical statement about the nature of intelligence, adaptation, and potential. Commander Zarak's translation device crackled with what could only be described as a mix of professional terror and grudging respect. "This is not technology," she muttered. "This is a living entity." Volkov's final statement hung in the air like a challenge. Technology is not something we create. It's something we communicate with. Outside the facility, the first transmissions were already being prepared. The Galactic Confederation would receive more than just a technological report. They would receive a warning. Humanity's understanding of technology was about to change everything they knew about progress, communication, and the very nature of intelligence. The ARI was more than an invention. It was humanity's most dangerous dream. And the galaxy was about to wake up. The Galactic Diplomatic Nexus on Concordia Prime was a marvel of architectural compromise, a structure designed to neutralize cultural tensions before they could ignite. Ambassador Michael Okonkwo walked its crystalline corridors with a precision that suggested he was more than a diplomat. He was a strategic weapon. The Confederation had cornered humanity. Their plan was elegant in its complexity, a multi-layered economic and political maneuver that would have systematically dismantled any known civilization. Trade restrictions, resource embargoes, diplomatic isolation. a death by 1,000 bureaucratic cuts. They didn't understand who they were dealing with. The preliminary hearing began with traditional Confederation pomp. Holographic representations of 12 different species filled the central chamber, each delegation seated in carefully calculated positions of power and influence. Commander Zarak sat prominently, her multi-jointed form a testament to the Confederation's perceived superiority. Okonkwo's opening statement was not what anyone expected. "Information is not a resource," he began, his voice carrying a resonance that seemed to recalibrate the very atmosphere of the chamber. "It's a living ecosystem." The translation algorithms struggled to capture the full depth of his words. Where most diplomats would present legal arguments or economic projections, Okonkwo was conducting a masterclass in multi-dimensional communication. Each sentence was a weapon. Each pause was a strategy. He didn't just respond to the Confederation's allegations. He deconstructed their entire approach to galactic governance. Economic sanctions became examples of technological myopia. Trade restrictions were revealed as primitive attempts to control an ecosystem of innovation. "Your approach to governance," Okonkwo continued, "is a fossil. You're attempting to manage a living network using tools designed for a mechanical universe." The holographic displays began to shift. What started as a standard diplomatic hearing transformed into a living data visualization. Economic models became breathing entities. Trade routes morphed into neural networks. The entire concept of galactic interaction was being reimagined in real time. Commander Zarak's preliminary confidence began to fracture. Okonkwo wasn't just defending humanity. He was offering a fundamental reimagining of galactic interaction. Each diplomatic restriction was countered not with a legal argument, but with a demonstration of human potential. A proposed trade embargo became an opportunity to showcase technological innovation. A resource restriction became a chance to demonstrate adaptive economic models. Dr. Marcus Chen, watching remotely, sent an encrypted message to Captain Rodriguez. "He's not just negotiating. He's teaching." The truly terrifying aspect of Okonkwo's approach was its fundamental humanity. Where most species saw diplomacy as a zero-sum game, he presented it as a collaborative ecosystem. Each challenge was an opportunity. Each restriction was a potential innovation. By the hearing's midpoint, the holographic representations began to change. Delegates from other species leaned forward, their traditional postures of bureaucratic rigidity slowly dissolving. They weren't just hearing an argument. They were witnessing a philosophical revolution. Sovereignty, Okonkwo declared, is not defined by restriction. It's defined by the ability to transform limitation into opportunity. The Confederation's carefully constructed case began to disintegrate, not through traditional legal arguments, but through a complete reimagining of the diplomatic landscape. Okonkwo wasn't just defending humanity. He was offering the galaxy a new way of understanding interaction. Commander Zarak realized, with a mixture of professional terror and grudging respect, that they had fundamentally misunderstood humanity. This wasn't a species to be controlled or restricted. This was a living, breathing ecosystem of potential. Her translation device captured her muttered response. "They're not negotiating. They're evolving." As the hearing concluded, the diplomatic landscape of the galaxy had been fundamentally altered. The Confederation's carefully constructed restrictions lay in intellectual ruins. Humanity had not just defended itself, it had offered a new paradigm of galactic interaction. The final transmission was both a warning and an invitation. We are not interested in winning. We are interested in understanding. Outside the diplomatic chamber, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The rules had just changed, and humanity was just getting started. The Omega Quadrant became a crucible of cosmic conflict. Captain Aria Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Defiant, her neural interface painting the surrounding space with layers of possibility that defied conventional understanding. The Confederation's ultimate weapon, the Convergence Array, hung before them like a mathematical nightmare given physical form. 57 capital ships, experimental quantum phase weapons, and a level of technological sophistication that had conquered hundreds of civilizations. They didn't understand humanity. Quantum entanglement cascade initiated. Lieutenant Commander Elena Volkov reported, her voice a calm counterpoint to the cosmic violence about to unfold. The Defiant wasn't just a ship. It was a living theorem of human potential. The Confederation's attack began with mathematical precision. Quantum phase weapons that could theoretically slice through the fundamental fabric of space-time. Energy signatures that could neutralize entire planetary systems. A strategy so perfect it became its own fundamental weakness. Rodriguez understood something fundamental about perfection. It was just another form of predictability. Adaptive resonance protocol, she commanded. The words were almost a caress, a communication with the living technology around her. The human fleet didn't meet force with force. They met it with something far more dangerous, a living, breathing ecosystem of strategic innovation. Where the Confederation saw a straightforward attack, humanity saw a multi-dimensional conversation. Each Terran vessel began to move with an intelligence that bordered on sentience. They weren't just ships. They were living extensions of a collective consciousness that could reshape the very rules of engagement. A Confederation battlecruiser launched what should have been an unblockable quantum phase strike. The targeted human destroyer didn't just dodge. It transformed the weapon's energy signature into a communication channel, momentarily hijacking the weapon's quantum entanglement to send a cascade of disruptive information back to its source. Dr. Marcus Chen, monitoring from the tactical station, sent an encrypted burst to Rodriguez. They're playing chess. We're rewriting the concept of game itself. The battle became a living language. Ships communicated through energy signatures. Defensive systems became offensive weapons. Every moment was a multi-dimensional conversation that the Confederation couldn't even begin to comprehend. Commander Zarak watched from her support vessel, her multi-jointed appendages betraying a growing sense of professional terror. This wasn't just a battle. This was a fundamental reimagining of conflict itself. The Convergence Array, the Confederation's ultimate weapon, began to destabilize. Not through traditional means of destruction, but through a cascading series of informational interventions that made its own systems unable to recognize themselves. "We're not destroying their technology," Rodriguez murmured. "We're having a conversation it doesn't understand." By the engagement's midpoint, 12 Confederation capital ships had been completely neutralized, not destroyed, not conquered, simply transformed. Each vessel became a technological puzzle that would take years to comprehend. Lieutenant Kai Nakamura's psychological warfare protocols ran beneath the entire engagement, turning the battle into a living, breathing ecosystem of strategic communication. Every energy signature was a sentence, every defensive maneuver a paragraph in a language of pure potential. The final moments of the conflict were nothing short of miraculous. The Convergence Array, a weapon designed to rewrite the fundamental laws of space-time, found itself caught in a cascade of adaptive resonance. Its own perfection became its fundamental vulnerability. Systems designed to be unbreakable began to communicate in ways their designers could never have anticipated. Rodriguez's final transmission to the Confederation was a masterpiece of strategic communication. Conflict is not about winning. It's about understanding. As the battle concluded, the Omega Quadrant held its breath. 17 Confederation ships drifted, their systems in a state of profound recalibration. They hadn't been destroyed. They had been fundamentally challenged. Dr. Chen turned to Rodriguez with a subtle smile. Engagement parameters recorded. Another lesson delivered. Outside, the vast darkness of space seemed to pulse with a new understanding. Humanity had sent a message written in the language of physics, strategy, and pure, unbridled innovation. The galaxy was listening, and it would never be the same. The Galactic Concordance Chamber was not prepared for what humanity was about to propose. Representatives from thousands of civilizations watched as Ambassador Michael Okonkwo, Captain Aria Rodriguez, Dr. Elena Volkov, and Dr. Marcus Chen stood before them, not as conquerors, but as architects of a new galactic paradigm. Commander Zarak, her multi-jointed form now bearing the subtle marks of profound transformation, understood that this was more than a diplomatic meeting. This was a fundamental recalibration of galactic existence. Sovereignty, Okonkwo began, is not a condition of restriction. It is a state of continuous adaptation. The holographic displays around the chamber began to pulse with living data. Where traditional diplomatic meetings would present static information, this presentation was a breathing, evolving ecosystem of potential. Economic models transformed before the delegates' eyes. Technological barriers dissolved. Cultural boundaries became fluid networks of communication. Dr. Volkov stepped forward, the Adaptive Resonance Interface, ARI, manifesting as a holographic representation that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Technology is not a tool, she explained. It is a conversation, the living dialogue between potential and possibility. Each representative saw something different. The silicon-based life forms witnessed a new approach to information processing. The energy-state civilization sought a reimagining of communication. The carbon-based species recognized a reflection of their own adaptive potential. Lieutenant Commander Kai Nakamura presented the psychological profiles, not as static reports, but as dynamic ecosystems of understanding. Where traditional intelligence reports sought to categorize and restrict, this approach celebrated diversity as the ultimate form of strength. Captain Rodriguez's contribution was perhaps the most profound. The battle records from the Omega Quadrant confrontation were not presented as a military victory, but as a case study in collaborative transformation. Each engagement became a lesson in communication, each conflict an opportunity for mutual understanding. Dr. Chen's data analysis went beyond traditional metrics. He showed how humanity's approach was not about dominance, but about expanding the very concept of potential. The technological innovations were not weapons, but invitations to a different way of understanding existence. The Galactic Concordance was witnessing something unprecedented. Humanity was not seeking to conquer or control. They were offering a fundamental reimagining of galactic interaction. "We are not exceptional," Okonkwo declared. "We are simply the first to understand that limitation is an invitation to innovation." The chamber fell into a profound silence. Commander Zorak, representing the Confederation, found herself stepping forward. Her translation device carried a mix of emotions that defied simple categorization: respect, wonder, and a fundamental shift in understanding. "You have not defeated us," she stated. "You have transformed us." The proposal was breathtaking in its simplicity. A new framework of galactic interaction that saw civilizations not as competing entities, but as a living, breathing ecosystem of potential. Economic systems that adapted in real time. Communication networks that celebrated diversity. Technological exchanges that saw innovation as a collaborative process. Lieutenant Nakamura's psychological model showed something remarkable. This was not a human victory. This was an invitation to collective evolution. As the final agreements were drafted, something extraordinary happened. The holographic displays began to merge, not through force, but through a living, adaptive communication. Economic models became living networks. Cultural boundaries dissolved into collaborative ecosystems. Dr. Volkov's final statement captured the essence of the moment. "We are not here to lead. We are here to learn." The Galactic Concordance became something entirely new. Not a treaty, not an alliance, but a living, breathing framework of potential. Outside the chamber, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had invited it to become something more. As the representatives began to disperse, carrying with them a fundamentally transformed understanding of existence, one thing became crystal clear. The game had changed, and humanity was just getting started.